This is an edited version of the recording of the WordPress Portsmouth Meetup on the 17th of March, a practical guide to updating WordPress with slides, demos and virtual hand-holding. 5.7 Esperanza was released on the 9th of March this year. And here is the blog post that tells you the news about the release of it, written by Matt Mullenweg himself, and was filed under releases. We're not doing a talk about WordPress 5.7 per se, but we will just tell you a little bit about it. That this version includes updates to Gutenberg, the block editor, to version 9.9, which is now a few versions back level compared to where the plugin is. A new color palette with reduced number of colors, and there they are on the right. Something to do with the ability to get HTTPS in one click. Some improvements to the robots API. Some more work on the jQuery cleanup. Something to help improve performance, lazy loading of iframes. And as Johnny Orbert mentioned yesterday, there's some improvements with the password reset link. You can now send it to users of your site from the admin panel, and it saves them having to try to log in and find the password reset themselves. At the same time as updating WordPress to 5.7, quite a lot of the core themes are also updated. So we will see that happening as we go through the update process. If you want to read more about any of these different things, you will see that there are links at the bottom of each of the different slides, which will be published on WPPompey website as both a PDF and a PowerPoint. Right, so questions that I asked on the meetup form were, have you updated to WordPress 5.7 yet? Did you have any problems? Did you take a backup before and after? Anything else you'd like to say? And I had so far 11 replies out of 20 somebody, and they were a mixture of yes and no, and nobody who replied said that they've had any problems so far, which is nice. So here we go. This is what we're going to attempt to cover over the next sets of slides. The what is being updated, which includes all those things on the left. Why we're doing it, might mention that at some point. Who performs these updates? When do you do them? Where do you do them? And how do you do them? So here's a question for you. You log into your website and you see that message, WordPress something something is available. Please update now. What do you do next?
Do a backup.
Do a backup. Well, what we could do next is we could click on one of those links to find out what this WordPress 5.7 is all about. So if I'd have clicked on that first one there, WordPress 5.7, it would have taken me to this page here, and I could have read all about it. WordPress.org support is always updated whenever a WordPress version is updated. And there's the list of all the changes that I mentioned. So we've decided, yes, that we're going to go update to WordPress 5.7. We're going to click on that Please Update Now link. It takes us to here, and it says, please back up your database and files, and for help with updates, visit the Updating WordPress documentation page. So you think, I wonder what that means. I'll click on the Please back up your updates, and it tells you about this. And if you go to this particular page here, it tells you multiple ways of performing backups, which can be done on your hosting, or you can have a plugin to do it, all sorts of different things. So we're not actually going to talk about each individual method of performing backups. We're just going to go and do it at some point in time. And then the other link was, what is updating WordPress all about? And it describes the different ways you can do it. And if you read this page, WordPress org support article updating WordPress, then you can find out all about what the different methods are. We will come and cover those a bit later on. So the question is, have we taken a backup? Have you backed up your files, and have you backed up your database? Well, we've seen some previous presentations on how we can take backups, with one from Steve on Updraft Plus, and then there was a presentation of the command line version that we saw from Paul Thompson. And I've also listed in that top 10 WP plugins a list of the different backup plugins that you could possibly use if you want to go that particular way. Have I taken a backup? And is my backup complete? So it mentions taking backups of files and the database, but is your backup complete? Could you actually build another version of your site with that complete backup? Do you have a backup of all the configuration? Or if your site actually needed to be moved to somewhere else, have you also backed up the emails? When was the last time you backed those things up? And are there any logs you might need to keep if you're going to have a look at before and after, that sort of stuff? So you need a complete offsite backup. What is the worst thing that could happen? Scott's not here at the moment, but last week, I don't know how many of you heard, and somewhere in Strasbourg, which is in France, isn't it? This company's data center burnt down. And for those people who had virtual private, what they call VPS servers, they were responsible for making their own backups. And for those people who had shared hosting, maybe the hosting company had kept backups for them. But the worst thing that could happen is basically everything could disappear. So if you have got a backup, it's not a very good thing. Scared yet?
It's in Germany.
I'm always scared when I'm making updates, you know.
Yeah. What we're not going to cover in this is when it has gone wrong, how to fix it, because that would be completely different, a separate presentation.
You can never have too many backups.
Very true.
Well, so I had some backups being taken and I had too many, and eventually it couldn't take the next backup because it ran out of disk space.
That's your fault.
So I didn't have enough backups, but I had too many at the same time. Right, so we've taken our backup. Yes, you haven't seen me take the backup, have you? But I pretended I've taken the backup, and now we click on the Update Now button. Has anyone ever tried clicking on the Hide This Update button?
Yes, you.
I did, after I did this backup, after I did this update, and I thought, what was the point of doing that? So someone must explain it. If you do click on it, then you click on the Next Update Now button, not the one that's in blue. So I'm going to click on Update Now, and this is what happens. Yeah, I haven't got a white screen of death. It's just started doing it, and it's going to take a bit of time doing it. So here we go. It's telling me that it's performing the update, and I sat there, and lo and behold, I sat there and the little swirly bit went swirly, 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 and 5 minutes later it went, oops, something's gone wrong. And I thought, well, it was a bit unexpected. I had assumed it was just going to work perfectly normally, but it has actually failed. Oh dear. Had it not failed, this is where I would have ended up. I would have ended up on the WordPress 5.7 updates page, and it would have told me all about WordPress 5.7. I could have seen what's new, or I could have clicked on credits, and if I'd have read carefully through the credits, I would have seen people's names in there that I recognise. I would have seen Abba's, I would have seen Olga's, and mine, because lots of people work on WordPress and lots of people get credited for their contribution. God knows what my contribution was to WordPress 5.7, probably something to do with Gutenberg. Anyway,
It was.
it was.
It was, yeah.
Oh,
And FSD, I think.
oh right. So have a good look at that, find the different names. Probably I missed out Christopher as well. Were you involved in it this time around, Christopher?
He's got his work to do now.
I've got absolutely no idea. Potentially, maybe, I don't know. I'm involved with lots of things. You can't prove any of it. It wasn't me. I swear to God. Someone else.
Right, now if you wanted to hear about WordPress 5.7 updates, you could have joined the WordPress Oxford meetup half an hour ago. Right, so there, WordPress core has updated itself. Thank you very much. Now what we're going to do? Well,
So it did update it, even though it said it hadn't.
yes, it did, yes.
Oh, okay.
It said it had failed, right? But then I realised that I had a little look and it had actually completed most of it. It was doing something else. The important part had worked. We'll come on to what the failure was. It would have taken me through to there. And then after that, I would have then been able to go back to WordPress updates and get to this bit and find that there are some plugins to update. So as before, with the WordPress update, I could go and find out what the changes are. And here we can see the changes to this plugin called Events Calendar, which had interestingly been updated because of people having problems with PHP 5.6. Of course, there's a version of PHP which is out of support now, and an answer to a question on the chat is no, unfortunately we're not going to be talking about updates to PHP during this bit, but we could discuss it later if we have time. Right, so here, because I only had one plugin update, I clicked on the Install Update Now button, and lo and behold, it went away and installed the update to the plugin. And then afterwards, it said, oh, look, well, here you are, you're working in UK English or ENGB. I've got updates to your translations for the Events Calendar plugin. And what's more, I've got updates for your translations to the 2021 theme. So I'll update that as well, which is nice, but I hadn't actually updated the themes yet. So let's carry on. We'll go to the WordPress updates page again and find I've got 8 themes there that need to be updated. So let's select them all by clicking on the Select All button and press the Update Themes button, and off we go, and it performs some updates. And for each of the different themes, it says, I've worked. And then it says, if you want to see the details of it, you can click on the Show Details button link, which I did. And lo and behold, it said it's done it and gave me some strange message here. But otherwise, it seemed to work. And then it said afterwards, oh, and by the way, look, these themes have been updated and I've got translations of those. I'll do those as well. Isn't that nice? So now we've got to the point where WordPress reckons it's done it. It's updated the WordPress core to the latest version and it's updated my plugins, themes and translations. So that was it, nice and easy, wasn't it? But what I failed to do there is I hadn't actually had a look to see if my website still works. So this I didn't realize I hadn't done until just a few minutes ago. So I thought I'd better show you this website does still work, but here is actually an example of something where the update was done by using a thing called staging or a staging site. Now, Drew might tell us about staging sites a bit later on, might he? Good. So, yes, my site did work. And so now that my site's been updated and I'm on WordPress 5.7, wouldn't it be a good idea to take another backup so that if I ever have to restore, I don't have to go through that again. Now, there wasn't actually a problem with that update, but had there been a problem with that update, it might be a nice idea to, once you've fixed it, to have a backup so that you know you can continue from there. So
would you rename that backup as post update or something to differentiate it, or
well,
how do you do that?
how would you do it? I name my backups with a date timestamp on them as part of the file name, and then if you give it the same name, it then gives you an option to have 1, 2 or something, because I use Windows.
Right.
I take my backup.
So how would you know that it was a post backup as opposed to a pre-backup?
by the fact that it's later than the previous one.
Okay.
But I might, of course, be a stupid person and revert my version of WordPress to a previous one. So how does anyone know what's in a backup? Look inside the contents of the backup, I suppose.
And it will depend on whether which way you're backing up your files as well. If it's a plugin, some of them will let you set a name and others will literally just date and timestamp it for you. So it depends whether you're sort of on pro or free versions of things. But yeah, ideally you'd say post update, so you know to go to anything that's pre-update if there was a problem. And equally, if you did for some reason a week later needed to restore your site, you'd want to go to the post update one because you know that'd be the most up to date.
Because for clients, I used to put it on a spreadsheet, so I had a easy reference of what the name of the backup was, what version of the software it is, and post or pre, because otherwise I find it really difficult to know. Yeah. But that was before you could actually change them in the file name.
So what I should have written there is don't overwrite your previous backup, create a new one. As Steve said, you can never have too many backups.
If you've got a backup with a proper timestamp, not just a date stamp, then you won't overwrite it. Yeah. Some systems still only use a date.
I only use the date, yes. Of course, if you happen to take the backup on the 27th of March at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is clock change in the UK for those people who don't know. Some people have already changed their clocks, haven't they, Meg? Right, should we move on?
I have a question regarding backups.
Yes.
Particularly, how do you deal with a backup on if you're restoring a backup to an e-com site, out of curiosity? The orders have transpired between, and I believe it points to what Olga was asking in the chat as well. Yeah.
I'm just complaining, not asking actually.
He was asking it in a roundabout way, Olga. It's fine.
Yeah.
I kind of agree. You know, I have this newspaper site where it's like really active and the people comment all the time, and anytime we've had to do any major thing, we've ended up having to do this like really manual piecemeal, like restore the backup and then go into the other and try to like piece together things that happened. I don't know.
This is not a new problem.
No.
No, it's not a new problem, but it's
what I've used to do when I was an Oracle DBA was that you take the backup and then you switch on transaction logging, and that keeps a separate log until you switch it off. So you can wind back the transactions that have happened since the backup into the new system. So you never lose anything. But it is not an easy or intuitive process, and you have to watch it very carefully. Otherwise you end up with duplicate transactions.
I've always wondered if you could use Git. So in theory, if you did a SQL dump and saved it in a Git, and then you took the new and saved it as a Git, then couldn't you merge? I've never like tried that in the wild, but theoretically,
no, because you'd have to make sure that there are no table row deletions as part of the transaction process. If there are only inserts, then it might work. But if there are any deletions, then it won't work because they won't be in you won't know what they are in the dump. Okay. But that is taking us way beyond the scope of this.
Yes, yes. If we took, you need to go to a specialist WooCommerce thing or any e-commerce thing for how do you manage restoring of a system which is actually a lot more dynamic than the straightforward brochure website.
And it's a good question for the e-commerce web meetup on Wednesdays in London.
Oh, yes.
But just to give you an example, I was involved with the installation of the first credit card system in Moscow. And there we had 100 ATMs at the time, and they closed every ATM at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning for 10 minutes whilst they did the backup, the definitive backup for the week. They had incremental backups, but they copied the system, switched it over to the backup server, and did that bit of maintenance in a 10 to 15 minute window, and then brought it all back online. That is quite common in many cases.
That's what I would have suggested, taking it offline.
Yeah.
It's difficult though if you've taken a backup and then a day or two later you realise there's problems and you need to go back to your backup. Of course, you've got all of that that's happened in between. So
if you're in that situation, you probably have a better plan of doing the update than just letting it happen.
Yeah.
You do plan your migration and you know it's going to work. So there you go. Have you taken a backup and you know it's any good? Oh, just done. So we did our updates. What was the worst that did happen? Well, we've had some reports from people, and I have listed 4 here so far, and one of which was a problem reported by Steve Wood. Do you want to talk about it, Steve?
Basically, I dropped in an image and I wanted to make it full screen width. And you go into the alignment button, clicked on it. The little menu at the top, when I clicked to full width, shifted off to the left. So half of it disappeared off the screen.
all right.
This Herb very kindly did some debugging and found out that it only did it with the customizer theme that I was using, and it was something that was calculating offsets, wasn't it, Herb?
Yeah. And have they updated it?
Well, I've reported it, but
right.
I only had time to do that today. So
good. So, but that was a minor problem, and it didn't actually break your site. It was just the editor misbehaved, and there were workarounds for it as well.
Yeah.
So Andrew reported that he ran the new health check, or he ran his health check after updating it, and it said your site doesn't work with HTTPS correctly. Isn't that right, Andrew?
That is right, Herb.
Yeah, and the message said, talk to your hosting about it. So he did. He talked to Scott, and Scott said, that's not right. So we looked into it further, and lo and behold, we found that it had already been raised by other people, and that basically they said, that was a silly test. We're not going to do that test anymore. And so the fix for it will be in version 5.7.1. And we'll come on to the other ones at some time in the future. Has anyone else found something that they want me to add into this list?
No, but I mean, with the customizer issue, what is the recommended way of upgrading Core? Do you wait until your theme says it works with the latest version of Core?
That was the problem we had with 5.6, wasn't it? Because lots of themes and plugins hadn't been updated and still haven't. And then everything broke. Millions of sites went down because of that. So I must admit, go on.
That was jQuery rather than that you just need to do the jQuery plugin.
Yeah, but the point is that WordPress has got ahead of the rest of the industry. So unless I very much now check the latest status and compatibility of plugins and themes before I update to a major version of WordPress.
I must admit, I do for a few of my clients as well. If you've got a specific customized theme, you need to make sure that theme is already supported in the latest core before going to the core.
One big issue is if you bought a theme in that is bundled with premium plugins, they're quite often a little bit behind the latest versions of the plugins as well.
Yes, and quite a lot of people have bought a theme many years ago and then they update WordPress to a new version, and lo and behold they find their theme doesn't work, and the simplest thing to do is to go and buy the theme again or switch. But that's all about updating on your live site, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's move on. So what have we covered so far? Well, we've updated WordPress core, plugins, themes and translations, and we know that the database has been updated because of that. Did we?
Can I ask a question?
You may indeed.
Can you back out these updates? I mean, if you found you updated to 5.7 and everything's going horrible, can you go back to 5.6?
Well, how many ways are there of going back to 5.6? You could install 5.6 over the top of 5.7, or you could restore to your backup, which was prior to 5.7.
Yeah, with some backup systems don't save the core files. One plugin I use is called WP Downgrade. That works quite well, but the trouble is if you go back from 5.7 to 5.6, it doesn't necessarily delete any additional files that 5.7 installed. So if you then run a WordFence scan, for example, you can end up with about 80 odd errors, unknown files in your core. But it does work very well.
Why do we perform these updates? Because we did it for security fixes, for new functionality, because we're going to get support if we update it, or we might be updating it to fix things that were broken in previous versions. We wanted those things fixed. Who performed the updates so far? We did it using the WordPress administrator or someone who has the capability of doing that. We did it straight away and we did it after the backup. So I did it on that system. You may have noticed that it was in the local development site and I did it manually using WordPress admin. So there's all the other different things that we now have to somehow try to cover. So what are all the other components that might need updating? Other plugins, if you, as Steve said, if you've got a premium theme and you've got some premium plugins built into there, they may need updating. And those things might not actually be updatable via the automatic updates. Therefore, you have to install them yourself and do that by downloading the zip file for them and then using add new. Nowadays, it's a lot easier because WordPress allows you to replace an existing version of a plugin with a modified version. And if you happen to want to restore to a previous version of that, you can update that. WordPress will point out that you're going the wrong way, but you can still actually do that. There are some other plugins which don't get updated automatically, and these are called MU or must-use plugins. And if these need to be updated, you're going to have to find a manual way of doing this, and people will probably use FTP file transfer protocol to do it. Similarly, there's plugins called drop-ins, which might need to be manually changed at some point in time, but not often. And after an update, you may also need to go and clear the cache of your website so that it starts building new versions of the pages to be delivered, especially if you need to take on new functionality. If you happen to have a WordPress multi-site site, you need to go and perform the update of all the different sites in your network. And finally, there are some files, configuration files, that might need to be manually modified to make the system work properly. Hasn't happened for a long time, but one file that doesn't ever get updated is wp-config.php. And after an update, you might notice some messages being produced from plugins that didn't produce them before because they hadn't been written all that well, and you get notices. So you might need to go and set WP debug to false if you didn't already have it set to false. Where do we perform these changes then? We did it on a local site and it broke, but it seemed to be okay, so that was all right. Some people might do them directly on a live site and keep their fingers crossed, or we could use a staging site, or we could do it on a completely different site and basically try it out, but not on the live site. At this point in time, let's just move on a bit more. So here we go. I realized I hadn't updated my WordPress multi-site site correctly, so I went in and had a look at the About Us page, and lo and behold, my code is poetry image is broken. I hadn't noticed that before. There was another bug that's been raised and reported and will be fixed in WordPress 5.7.1. But what I needed to do is I needed to go and click on the upgrade network thing, so it will update the databases for all of the sites in the WordPress multi-site site network. Right, moving on. So, places to perform these updates safely are on a staging site. And basically, a staging site is supposed to be a copy of your live site, and you can make changes there. And if they work, you have a choice. You could partially or fully deploy the changes you've made on the staging site back to live, or you can just go and perform the updates on the live site. So if you happen to have a WooCommerce site and you've taken a copy to staging, what you wouldn't do is deploy it back to the live site. You just go and apply the changes to the live site.
So this is how I started. Added the photo in. Hang on, I didn't deselect. Added a photo in, and then I wanted to make it full width. So wide width works okay. When it obviously it shifted the menu over. When you go to full width, it does that. And of course, you can't get to the button to undo that. But Herb reminded me that you got this option, so you can go to top toolbar, turn it on there, and then you can get back to use it here. So that was it.
Yeah, so that top toolbar option is quite a good saviour, really, isn't it?
It's a good get out, yeah. I've forgotten all about that, and I was thinking, how the hell do I get to it? I was going to have to delete the thing and start again.
And the other option was you could have chosen to go into the code editor and done it manually, but that would have been horrible.
Yeah, rather defeats the object, doesn't it?
Or did you try pressing the undo button?
I didn't actually. Let's try it. Ah. Oh well. Something else to try.
I don't know. Right, whilst you're there, show us some other things that are wonders of WordPress 5.7 block editor.
I was just playing around. I went through and tried some of the different bits and pieces and options that you got now. So drag and drop works okay into a new full block from the full menu, but it won't work from the small menu.
All right.
Buttons. These look quite good. I'm assuming these are buttons, plural. Is there going to be a replacement for the button option? You can do quite a lot of different things. It's got different sizes, 25, 50, 75 or 100% widths. You can center align the block to align the buttons. These will actually wrap if you have different size buttons there. They just wrap round, so you'd end up with a stack like this. You can put gradients on the buttons, change colours of the buttons, and then this is the old style button, singular. It's got no real options anymore, so I'm assuming the others are going to take over. You can change the sizes. This is the largest version of the icons. It's a shame they're not actually round. They're a little bit squashed.
Is that your theme again, do you think?
Maybe. Don't know. Font size support. You can change the size of the text of the actual bullets. That seemed to work okay. And the full height block works okay. To put the image in, so you can get it to expand to fill the full size and full height and width. I think that's all I did. Kinsta have got quite a good, useful tutorial or explanation. They've got some code in there as well if you want it in blocks.
So I'll just play this and then we'll talk about it. So here I am in SiteGround, and SiteGround provides a one-click staging capability. So I typed in the name of the staging I wanted to create, demo 2021-03-17, and off it went, and it created a staging site. Now it does this by creating it as a subdomain of your existing site. So eventually we're going to see a thing called staging2.wppompey.org.uk. This is only a 3-minute video, so it shouldn't, well, it's a 7-minute video, sorry. Now, if I'd have done this manually with the WordPress 5-minute install, it would have taken longer than that probably. So now we have the staging thing, staging2.wppompey, and off I went to go and visit it, and I thought, oh, that's a shame. I can't see it because it hasn't got a SSL certificate for that subdomain, which is no surprise really, because it didn't know it existed until just now. So I'll let myself into the site.
You've switched your camera off or something.
Where?
You can't see your lips moving.
Oh, sorry. Well, you can see my lips move on the video.
Yeah, but that's not synced with what you're actually saying.
No, because I wasn't saying anything there. Do you want me to rewind it a bit, or have you been following it? Go back a bit, right. Can you see now?
Yep.
It didn't have an SSL certificate, and I thought, never mind, I'll just carry on. I haven't pressed play now. And there, lo and behold, the website appeared. So now I went, right, I've got a staging site, so now I can perform the update to WordPress 5.7. So I logged in, same username and passwords, because it's a complete copy of the site. Everything's the same users, anything that was there before. And lo and behold, we go in there and, oh, I'm already on WordPress 5.7. Oh, we'll worry about that. I'll worry about that later. Let's go and see there's 4 plugin updates to perform. 2 of those ones I've made recently. So I'll install those. Well done, they've updated them. Right, let's go and have a look at the original site, WPPompey.org.uk. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Right, there's 4 plugin updates. So I've updated on staging and I can see those 2 plugins there, and now I can see that I've not updated the live site. That's good. Right, let's go back to have a look and see if I can deploy those changes. I'll choose custom deploy, and this is an option that SiteGround provide in their site tools. Excuse me. And it goes away and has a little look, and it says, oh, I know what's changed. So it has a little look at updates, deletions, and changes. You can see that those plugin files, some have been added, and there's some changes, and notice I scrolled a bit too quickly through that, but it actually discovered that there were database changes that it would apply, and it was going to apply them basically table by table. And something else, and I thought, well, I don't want to go and select all of those different things to update it. Why don't I just deploy the whole thing? So that's what I did. I didn't actually deploy the whole thing again, because what I wanted to do was to find out who updated my system to WordPress 5.7. And the answer was, I'd asked SiteGround to update it for me, because that was part of the deal when I installed the system, the site on that hosting. So that was a very quick viewing of using a staging site to make some changes. And what I didn't do, again, was I didn't check that they actually worked. I just checked that the update worked, which is, of course, was a bit daft.
Does it keep the staging site in place after you've done it? Or...
Yes. So both the staging2.wppompey.org.uk and the live site are still there, and which is why in SiteGround they say, would you like to go and protect your site so that other people don't go and visit your staging site, which is something which is an important thing to do.
Okay, that's good to know.
So when you protect your staging site, is it how would you do that for people who don't know and don't have SiteGround?
One way is you can tell the system to use basic authorization on accessing particular files, or you could use a plugin to do that sort of thing. I didn't do it. Anyone else want to give a nice answer?
It's actually not that easy to do. I mean, one of the things you do need to do as well is you need to discourage search engines. So if you've got a second copy of your site out there, you don't want to affect your search engine rankings. So that is an easy option, because that's in the WordPress admin. If you have a WordPress hosting site, so one of our sponsors, 34SP, they do include staging on levels of their hosting, and there are other managed WordPress hosting hosts that will include staging within it, and that's probably the simplest way, because they will make sure that it's sort of protected and only accessed through your hosting control panel. Otherwise, manually, you'd have to do things like update your htaccess files, just to make sure that the only people that get to it are yourself. But yeah, I mean, that could be something we include in another meetup.
It's definitely not something that I would recommend. I think if I was a do-it-yourselfer and I didn't consider myself a developer, I would definitely seek out managed hosting that offers the staging, because unexpected things happen often, and getting into the whole workflow of creating your own local copy of a site and then staging it or duplicating it on your server, like all of that's sort of like a little bit complicated. It isn't as easy as it sounds, and the scripts that run that whole thing are pretty serious in my opinion. So I agree with Drew. I think that if you're new to WordPress and you don't consider yourself a developer and you don't like dealing with things like SSH and the command line, find a host that offers staging. Even if it costs more, it's worth it, I think.
I'm continue to forget about these no index things, you know, because I'm always have staging sites and I need to show these sites to people. It's a bummer.
I mean, I know that there are products out there like, what is that one, Flywheel and stuff that allow you to sort of do that if you're an agent or if you are a developer and have a workflow for that. I really don't know about that, Olga, because, you know, I try to stay just like in my little verticals. Like I don't like to be an agent because I think all of that's very complicated and I just am not up for setting up, you know, like for my captains, I have it like very boxed in, right? So that I can manage it in this specific way. Yeah, I have done the opposite and been very disappointed with myself, meaning I keep it no indexed and then launch it and then forget that that's the
I've done that. Yeah.
Problem as well, you know.
Herb has taken a couple of copies of my website on different hosts, and have we done anything to hide them?
No, we haven't.
No, we haven't. Have we said that don't index them? I think we might have said that.
We did put a no index in. We did put no index in, so that search engines aren't supposed to go and index them. But we don't know whether or not they're having problems. Some very good questions about staging sites, and yesterday and today was the first time I had actually done any staging site stuff. So I wasn't prepared to answer all those questions.
If I can just go back to, so if you're not comfortable with things like posting and what have you, I would definitely encourage you, have a backup of your site. Do apply the updates to your current site and be prepared to restore to your backup if things don't go quite the way you want them to, because that can be a lot less complicated than having a staging site and trying to synchronize the sites.
Yes, and also if you happen to have a WordPress multi-site site, you could be stuffed as well.
How do you know that your backup has worked, that you can restore it?
That's where we do need a second host.
Who does that? Who goes that far? Hands up if you go that far.
I know that my backups worked because in the last few days I had taken backups from my sites on TSO host and migrated them to SiteGround, and they have worked. And therefore I know my backup was okay.
So would you say that it is, if you're going to take a backup, you've got to restore that backup, otherwise it's not worth taking a backup?
Well, I wouldn't restore it to my live site.
Well, I was asking everyone, people like all the people who put their hands up, do they do this every time?
I think if you're using a new product for the first time, you probably want to be happy that you know it is working. So if you've used a plugin for the first time, don't just install the plugin and then hope, you know, a year later when you actually do need to use it, that those backups were valid. If you're using some of the bigger players like Managed WP or Jetpack, then normally you've got a little bit more confidence because, you know, that's their business. So, and they've normally got a help desk that you can talk to as well. But yeah, I mean, if your site is business critical, and if you lost your site for a few days, it could have serious impact on your business, then you definitely want to have tested your backup at some point.
Validating your backup is to me, having been in the IT industry all my working life, absolutely critical, because I got burnt very early on with a backup process that didn't work properly. And when I had to come and restore it and found it didn't work properly, I learnt my lesson, and I make sure that any backups I take, at least the first time, I restore them to make sure the process works. And I do periodic restores after that. And I have a little box that sits on my shelf alongside my current server that I restore to. And it keeps a second copy, and it keeps your mind at ease that you know that you've got a backup process that's working.
And I think that can be an issue for people, again, who aren't necessarily comfortable with the development side of WordPress, because you may have bought your hosting and they may have installed WordPress for you, or you may have uploaded WordPress on the FTP. You've got your site up and running, you've got it looking wonderful, but where do you restore that back up to? So, okay, I'll have a second host and I'll upload it there, but then you've got those little fiddly things like, well, you've got two sites running the same domain name. When you try to log into your test site, the first thing it's going to do is the WordPress installation is going to go, well, I know my domain name is this, and it's going to send you back to your live site. So it can be tricky for somebody that doesn't sort of get into the sort of database tables or FTP of the site.
Well, my test server is not connected to the internet.
Yeah.
So I don't have that problem.
Yeah. But
I'm hosting my site locally. My test server is not connected to the internet. So it's not a problem.
Yeah. So how are the other ways of performing the updates? Well, we did them manually, as you saw. You can have it automatically done by WordPress, or you can have your hosting do it, or you can have a hybrid method, hybrid solution, and then you have different methods of performing some of those things if you're going to perform them manually. So let's have a quick look. Automatic updates. If WordPress has been given the opportunity to do things, you might receive an email to say, I've updated your themes, because you've told it to do that. Or you might get a message to say, I've updated your plugins. And now from version whatever it is, you will also update WordPress core. Is that right? I hope so. Or you could have your hosting service provides this. When I started with TSO Host, I discovered this thing called Softaculous, where you can say, I want to install an instance of WordPress. And it says, do you want us to maintain that for you and tell you about new versions? And lo and behold, we can see that this system can also tell you about updates and or apply them. So those things happen using hosting companies that use things like cPanel, TSO Host. With SiteGround, the reason that my website had upgraded to WordPress 5.7 and I hadn't realized it was because when I'd installed it, I didn't go and look at the auto update settings. And lo and behold, my settings were that if there's a major release available, it will install it within 24 hours. And that's what SiteGround did. It said it's taken a backup of the system. And I checked the backup and there it was. And it performed the update at 7:41 this morning and everything was okay. But what I want to know is if I've got that update plugins toggle turned on, how come I needed to update the plugins manually? Right, the hybrid solution we had, Christopher, he's disappeared now, I think, talk about the automatic and manual updating of plugins and themes where you can choose whether or not you have them updated manually or you let WordPress do them whenever they're updated. And you can click on that link there and it will take you to the video where Christopher described it for us back in July, September, August.
Can I ask a question? If a lot of you are very worried about these WordPress updates, sure none of you would set that to automatic, would you? Would anyone set that to automatic?
Yeah, well, those people who aren't worried about them or who
Is anybody here not worried about it? Is anyone here?
I think for me, like I said, Andrew, I keep a very, very tight rein on the sites that I administrate for people. So like my charter boat booking sites, like I've decided to, for this reason, this is a big motivation of the reason that I've decided to like kind of bring it all in-house and make it a SaaS offering, because it's too like wild, wild west out there with everything changing and going on. So it's very controlled. And yeah, I do allow the auto updates because I know every single thing. Like it's only the plugins that I already know, only the theme that I know. I write the theme, I write the main core plugin, it runs WooCommerce and a couple other things, and it's not sort of the wild, wild west of a typical WordPress site where someone can just go willy-nilly installing plugins all over the place. But yeah, I think that if I were not controlling the environment in such a rigid fashion, I would definitely have concern about it. Not because of WordPress itself, but because of all of the other, right?
That's very sound business practice.
And also, I think if you were if you're running your own WordPress site and you've maybe using a theme that comes installed with WordPress anyway, then you wouldn't worry about whether it gets auto-updated or not, because mostly everything you're using is provided by WordPress anyway.
maybe we should have a poll at the end who actually lets their site automatically update intentionally as opposed to me unintentionally. Right, so there are other methods of updating it. WordPress provides the very simple press buttons, and if you use FTP, it's not a simple thing. It's making sure you've got files to update. That will deal with your files, but not your database. Or you could use a control panel, which is provided by the hosting company. Or if you happen to be a person that's able to use the command line and you have the capability of getting to it somehow, you can use the WordPress command line interface. And if you happen to be even more techie, you can consider using Git to make deployments or version control of your system, WordPress plugins or themes. So I'm not going to take much time over this. If you want to use file transfer protocol, and I use FileZilla, then you basically have the remote site on the right hand side, which contains, as we can see, some themes there, and on the left hand side we have my local copy of those themes. And if I've made a change to a theme, for example that one there called Fizzy, I can just drag it from the left hand side onto the right hand side and put it into the themes folder. And FTP is quite a useful tool if your site ever goes completely wrong. You might want to go in there and do some strange things like renaming the plugins folder to broken plugins, and lo and behold, your site might suddenly get better. But all of that is covered in some pages on WordPress support about fixing your site once it's gone wrong. the different control panels that I've used. There are cPanel, which stands for control panel, and that was on TSO host. Red IT has their own control panel, and here we can see a little example of the file manager. And in SiteGround, they used to be on cPanel, but they changed to Sites Tools, and these are quite good, but there are some things from the cPanel that I miss. cPanel enabled me to click on a backup, tiny little thing there, and download a backup of the website in one zip file that contains everything, the whole site, the logs, the emails, the lot. And then I put it onto an external drive. And that's a nice simple backup solution. If I use SiteGround tools, I have to say, backup all the files, take a backup of the database, and when it comes to emails, currently I don't have a solution, so I could be shafted.
What was the name of that tool that you used?
Which one?
The one that you said was simple, it backed everything up.
cPanel, it's the backup option.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
And when we stop recording the video, I might tell you about the getting shafted with SiteGround's emails. WP CLI, if you happen to ever use this thing, it should be as simple as typing in a command saying WP core update, and it updates WordPress to a new version, and it all does it on the command line. That's, of course, it's not simple because you have to get to the point where you can actually run that command, which is an awful lot of configuration stuff, which is not something a person who likes clicking buttons can do. Similarly, I use Git for my version control and GitHub for where I host the particular things. I have repositories where I can manage the version using Git, and I do this on some sites. And I have to make sure that if I'm using a Git repository, then I don't allow WordPress to try to update it as well, because it can destroy things very quickly. I think WordPress has some built-in capability to stop doing things if it detects that Git is there. But this is outside of the scope of, talking too much about Git is outside the scope of today's thing. We're being pragmatic and practical. So, have we covered all those things that we should have covered on that list there? And if so, who's got some questions? And is it time to turn the recording off?
Yes.
I don't know. My question might be out of scope, but you were talking about using Git to manage stuff. And I would just like to go on record as saying that because the Git changed their whole API protocols and all of the authentication around that API protocol, it's not as straightforward to manage premium plugin code on Git as it used to be. And I made the decision to pull mine in-house and write my own API for that. License verification and that whole protocol. So just that.
Oh, that's licensing. That's different though, isn't it? Is it? It's gone mute, Meg.
Yeah, that's because it's a habit. Yeah, it obviously is a little bit out of scope, but it relates to just in general managing anything on the Git that you needed to check the releases via the API. It changed the authentication recently. Am I the only one who's talking about this? Do y'all just want me to stop? I'm just going to zip it.
So this is the post-talk stuff now. Right, here we go. WordPress Portsmouth Meetup, 261 members. That's wrong on the heading there. We've grown. Most other local meetups have not grown because they haven't been doing anything. Here's another picture of showing how that's happened. And this is what's happened recently. We had WordPress 5.7 released. We had International Women's Day on the 8th of March, and the same day we had a published People of WordPress, and there she is, Olga Gleckler. I hope you've all read that because it's a very nice write-up that was written by Abba and others. And are you embarrassed about it, Olga? Was it perfect?
Yes.
Do you want to tell us more?
I think I told enough already. It's a bit embarrassing, especially to that I was not so good and I am still possibly not so good like I want. Something to grow. It's always some space to grow.
Yeah. Let's hope in future we get more people who have mentioned in the People of WordPress. Right. So
you can always put suggestions forward, and we have a schedule now for the rest of the year. But if you haven't already done a HeroPress story, then do consider it. And we basically write a new article based on some of the information in HeroPress, and that's how to be featured in the People of WordPress. But also with my WordCamp Europe hat on, we're now starting to collect contributor stories. So if you have a story to share about being a contributor that could inspire others, then drop Olga or I a line, and we'll be pleased to send you a really easy form that you can fill in to tell us all about it.
Much more shorter than a safe for HeroPress.
Yeah, contributor stories are really nice and short, and we thought that we could persuade Herb to be one of our first contributors for that for this year.
Great, just great idea. No way to escape,
right.
Especially now that he's on the 5.7 about page release.
Sorry.
Especially now that you're listed on the 5.7 release.
I look for myself every time. Sometimes I'm there, sometimes I'm not. Some people are there twice.
Who?
WordPress 5.7.1 is probably going to come quite soon, and WordPress 5.8 hasn't yet gone into any planning whatsoever. So we don't know about that, but we do know it's something to do with site editing still.
We actually branched quite early from 5.7, so there's obviously work already on 5.8, but I don't know if we've put a timeline out yet. I'll have a look in a sec.
No, there wasn't this morning. Right, so coming up is full site editing, and there is an outreach experiment, and as Abba wrote on the 7th of March, the full site editor will further improve the editing experience for WordPress. Come and be a part of making it a great one. And so in December, the first call was to have a go at editing templates using full site editor. And in February, we got asked to build a home page with site editing blocks, and I believe Drew did do that. How do you get on?
Yeah, no, that's it's really quite useful to do actually, and I think the full site editor is going to be really a sort of leaps and bounds ahead for WordPress, especially for people who don't necessarily go out and buy themes. It's going to give people a lot more control. Obviously it's in beta, that's the reason why we're doing these things, so there were a couple of hiccups I came across. But I did see the call number 3, so I'm going to try and get involved in that this week.
Yeah, and I've just put a link in the chat to the Make WordPress marketing team on LinkedIn, and we've got a bit more about those calls and the FSE story as it goes forward. But also there's a whole lot of discussions about IE11 as well going on in core tonight. So if you're still using Internet Explorer 11, it's worth keeping an eye out on that. And just going back to the FSE, full site editing, we've been working today, and it'd be great to have your contributions, particularly Herb, because of some of the comments that you've already made about the terms in the FSC discussions that non-tech users are going to find hard to understand. So
can you publish the link?
Yeah, if you can pop it on this chat, that's fine. I'm just about to add it to core as well, so that'll be great. But it'd be really good.
They will be laughed at us, the core.
They can laugh at us. I'm in dev chat and they can laugh as well. But the issue is that not everybody understands the terms, and it's not, and there are different number of people who can necessarily familiar with the development knowledge in full site editing. So we need to try and help people understand it. It's a big thing. We would love your input into that. And you can just have a look at the stuff on FSE. We've got a reading guide and terms that you don't understand, or you think, actually, if this is going to do this, why do you not say this? And then we can feed it back. Because what we are is just trying to help people understand that you need to speak to different audiences in a language that is appropriate to them. And Drew's nodding, so I'm going to take it as he's going to put some things on our document, which is great.
Definitely, I shall look into it. I've always, I mean, one of my things as the, my developer hat is helping users run their own sites. So you always have different language use depending on who it is you're talking to. So yeah, I'll input onto that one, definitely.
Good. Right, just a few more. So today we could have gone to Oxford to find out what was new in WordPress 5.7, but Steve's done a bit of that for us already. Yesterday we could have gone to Birmingham and we could have listened to Elliot Richmond, who's sitting there lurking but hasn't said anything about what
Hello.
API. And he talked about the REST API, and he also talked about his favorite thing, pizza, and the ability to use the REST API to book pizzas in his local area, which is Cheltenham way, isn't it? Yes, he's waving a pizza at us. Next week there's WordPress Warwickshire and WordPress Leeds, and in 6th of April, if you want to know more about how to use the WordPress block editor, you can go up to Glasgow for their meetup. We did things 2 years ago, we did things last year. This year we're going to have done a few things. Clinic, Meg's talked about taking a plugin to Gutenberg. This is today's practical session, and next month, depending on when FSE goes in core, we might actually talk about full site editing. And if that's not the case, we might then find someone to talk about accessibility. But
We've got a lot of people who've volunteered, but because of COVID, we're having to be a bit more flexible with our dates. So that's just the part of the course at the moment. For the people who've just sent me messages saying about the IE experience and what the issues are, I've just dropped a link in the chat about the discussion on dropping support. It's only for particular aspects. It's not for everything. But that link will give you a bit more understanding of what's going on. And it's literally just being discussed now in dev chat as well tonight.
any news on WordCamp Brighton?
I haven't heard anything. There will be an announcement this week about WordCamp Europe dates. So do look out for that, and it will be online.
Right, here we go. Right, final bit of trivia. WordPress 5.7 has been downloaded 9.1 million times. That was this morning. When I had a look, there were 58,055 plugins in WordPress.org. And when I did my top 12 chart, a plugin that has now made it into the top 12 is one called, what's it called? Really Simple SSL, which has reached 56 million downloads, which is interesting that it got into the top 10 chart the same week that WordPress said we can do simple HTTPS for you. So if we'd come to the end of the meeting, which we haven't quite done yet because we haven't done all of the questions and answers, then we would thank our sponsors 34SP and Red IT. And now I'm going to stop recording and stop sharing, and then we can go back to all the questions in the chat that we've missed. This is an edited version of the recording of the WordPress Portsmouth Meetup on the 17th of March, a practical guide to updating WordPress with slides, demos and virtual hand-holding.